Romantic music. It defies definition, but it is instantly recognizable. Its literary links and associations are strong and invariably embedded in the music itself. The most striking example being the songs of Schubert, those ecstatic fusions of music and poetry drawn from the writings of Goethe, Heine, and Müller. Romantic music, like the Romantic movement as a whole, crumbles the walls between painting, literature, and music. Narrative becomes an unabashed element of the Romantic music, and with the emphasis on sound as a vehicle for expressing intimate personal emotions and feelings, the piano becomes the favored instrument. The piano of the early 19th century had a far greater range of sonority and touch than any earlier keyboard instrument, and the composer, who was typically also a performer, communicated directly with the audience. Nature, in her grander, wilder aspects, the waterfalls, avalanches, mountains, beloved of Romantic literature, was celebrated in Romantic music too. Mendelssohn traveled around Scotland and the Isles, noting down the principal theme of the Hebrides Overture. And the tormented heroes of Romantic drama and verse, the heroes created by Byron and Goethe, inspired not only Romantic paintings, but Romantic music, notably the music of Hector Berlioz. Like their heroes, the Romantic musicians, composers, and performers were themselves, in a sense, tormented. For them, the demons of suffering and of madness seemed an inescapable part of creative ecstasy. Pain became a faithful accomplice of many of the greatest Romantic composers. With the Romantics comes the image of the musician as a being in pain, a worldly pain, from which only art offers the hope of redemption. Beethoven, with his pain of infinite longing, inaugurates a new world in which the agonized artist or composer strives for a new humanity, a new truth, a new immediacy and understanding.
Beethoven. Beethoven's music opens up to us the realm of the monstrous and the immeasurable. Beethoven's music sets in motion the lever of fear, of awe, of horror, of suffering, and awakens that infinite longing which is the essence of Romanticism. He is accordingly a completely romantic composer.
E.T.A. Hoffmann, music critic and author of the Tales of Hoffmann.
almost alone. I may commit myself to social life only as far as the most pressing needs demand. I must live like an exile. When I do come near some social gathering, I'm seized with a burning terror. A fear that my condition may be revealed. Thus it has been during the last 6 months spent in the country. But what a humiliation when someone standing near me heard a flute in the distance, and I heard nothing. Or when someone heard a shepherd sing, and again I heard nothing. Such events brought me to the edge of despair. I might easily have put an end to my life. Only my art held me back. It seemed impossible for me to leave this world before I had produced all that I felt capable of producing.
Beethoven did not die at Heiligenstadt in 1802, and the young composer opened the way to romantic music. Born on German soil, Beethoven chooses to live in the old imperial city of Vienna, the city of his musical masters, Haydn and Mozart. But the classical forms of the symphony, of the sonata, changed their form under the force of Beethoven's genius. But in 1822, 5 years before his death, Beethoven felt almost completely isolated from the musical life of Vienna.
You will hear nothing of me here. What should you hear? Fidelio? They cannot give it, nor do they want to listen to it. The symphonies, they have no time for them. My concertos, my solo pieces, they are out of fashion. And in Vienna, fashion is everything.
Increasingly isolated towards the end of his life, an isolation which began at 30 when he started to lose his hearing, Beethoven embodies the Promethean myth of the artist in conflict with society, a myth that the Romantics turned into an often grim and bitter reality. In detail and in form, his musical language remains essentially classical. But for Beethoven, music is the sole means to enable man to pierce the mystery of the universe, to break free of the chains that hold us to the earth. Music is his creed, the spiritual and emotional statement of his inner experience.
I must write. For what weighs on my heart, I must express. I live only in my music. Music is a higher revelation than any wisdom or philosophy.
Music forged out of sorrow and misery. In a world which refuses him joy, he creates joy to give to the world. The motto of his romantic soul, joy through suffering. The German word Lied translates as song. But Lieder are more than songs. It is the union of poetry and music, a meeting of affinities. Lieder didn't begin with Schubert, but he is the greatest master of the form. He wrote more than 600 songs, transforming the lyric poetry of Goethe, Schiller, Müller, and Heine into song. Lieder is one of the magic moments of romantic music. when a new lyric poetry, as well as the advent of the piano, the perfect instrument to accompany the human voice, come together, achieving the romantic goal of wholeness. The piano sets the scene and establishes the mood. The words express what the music cannot. The music reaches where the words cannot enter. The result is something more beautiful, more authentic, and more purely romantic than the music alone or the poetry alone.
How I envy you your wings, O moist west wind, since you can tell him how I suffer in our separation. Quickly then to my beloved, speak tenderly and touch his heart, but see you do not grieve him. Do not tell him of my agony.
Transformed into music. A rippling brook, a dying girl. The themes of the songs are the themes of the romantics. Young lovers who cannot marry, young men and women who cannot settle, but must ceaselessly search out truth, meaning, the essence of life. Schubert spends his life in Vienna, but he never marries, never settles down, and never stops creating. The theme of the wanderer appears throughout his music, even though he creates music which also evokes gaiety, or music that is domestic and intimate. Most of his piano music is written to be played in the homes of the piano-owning bourgeoisie. Schubert is the soul of the informal music life in Vienna, and the musical evenings are called Schubertiads in his honor. Schubert, like Beethoven, is inspired by nature. Long walks in the Vienna woods plunge him into bouts of intense creative activity. His music longs for the lost paradise, for the perfect harmony that belongs to the natural world, but that eludes man.
Sorrow strengthens the understanding and strengthens the character. whereas happiness seldom troubles about the former and only makes for weakness and frivolity in the latter. All I have created is born of my understanding of music and by my own sorrow. 'Tis the sorrow that interests the world least of all.
Sacred night, you sink down upon us. Dreams too descend, as your moonlight descends through space into the still hearts of men. Men joyfully listen to these dreams and call when day breaks. Return, O sweet night. Return, O you sweet dreams.
Schumann is the link between the first generation of Romantic musicians, Beethoven, Schubert, Weber, and the second generation, Brahms, Liszt, Wagner. Schumann, the most generous of musicians towards others, ensures for Schubert his posthumous glory. He organizes the publication of many of Schubert's works, including his Ninth Symphony, which had never been performed. In Vienna, the piano of Schumann.
If heaven has given you a vivid imagination, you will, in lonely hours, often sit at the piano as though glued to it, ready to express your inner feelings.
Schumann is the most perfect incarnation of romantic music, the magnetic pole where all the conflicting forces of this rich period converge. Love engendered in Schumann the same exaltation as nature and poetry. His love for the beautiful and supremely talented pianist Clara Wieck inspired his greatest creative achievements. Their marriage, following years of being kept apart by her father, heralded an astonishing stream of creative achievement. Clara was his inspiration, his muse and his most faithful interpreter. Schumann's music becomes the vehicle of his most intimate feelings, and it grows into a complete record of his personal life. Life and work are indivisible.
For me, music is the language which allows one to communicate with the world beyond, with the life after death. Everything that occurs in the world affects me. Politics, literature, humanity. I dwell on everything in my own way until the thoughts break forth and clarify themselves in music. thrown into existence, into the night of the world, without guide, without master, without mother. Never has the universe appeared to me more beautiful than when I defy it and confront it in freedom and joy.
Schumann is never more terrible than in his struggle against oncoming madness. He enters into a world of illuminations and inner voices which he cannot control.
I can't read anymore. I keep hearing the note A.
My poor Robert suffers terribly. The hallucinations have now reached the point that he hears great symphonic pieces played right through, with the last note held until another piece comes into his imagination.
If you knew what ardor, what desire seethes in me, and how I would already be at opus 100 of my symphonies if only I had been able to write them down. One must create while there is still light.
It is that agonizing dread of darkness, of the night when no creation would be possible, that forces Schumann to work with feverish speed. But the divine delirium, that is the road to truth and creativity, is a dreadful journey. No longer capable of living among men, Schumann throws himself into the Rhine, but the gods reject his sacrifice, and he is condemned to suffer 2 more years of life.
Music is silent, but between the silences, a secret message. It is beginning to get dark. If only I could see you, speak to you one last time. But the road is too long.
Hoffmann, the author of Tales of Hoffmann, gives the piano a quasi-diabolic role when he creates a mad musician, Johannes Kreisler. In his Kreisleriana, which Schumann illustrated with a set of piano pieces, Hoffmann tells how Kreisler comments on his own compositions as they are being born under his fingers. In Kreisler's words, we find Schumann's heart.
Only a bright angel has power over this evil demon. It is the spirit of music which often rises victoriously within me. silencing with its mighty voice all earthly pains and miseries.
The idea of the artist signing a pact with the devil permeates romantic literature and art. The musician who personifies this legend is Paganini. The greatest violin virtuoso the world has ever heard, Paganini inspires the romantic composers to write music for him. And his example inspires Schumann and Liszt to dedicate their lives to music, to try to do for the piano what the Italian had done for the violin. Paganini, the birth of a virtuoso musician. Close to the immensity of the Russian steppes are born two musicians who, deliberately ignoring Western traditions of sonata, fugue, and counterpoint, are inspired by the popular songs and folk dances of their countries. Frédéric Chopin of Poland and Franz Liszt of Hungary. Schumann extends to Chopin the same generous and enthusiastic recognition he had given to Schubert and later to Brahms.
Off with your hats, gentlemen. Make way for a genius.
Age 21, Chopin travels to Paris. Within 6 months, he gives his first concert, which establishes him as an outstanding pianist and composer. It is his friend Liszt who introduces him to the novelist Georges Sand. Their passionate affair inspired some of his greatest music.
His creation was spontaneous and miraculous. He found it without seeking it, without foreseeing it. It came on his piano, suddenly, complete, sublime, or it sang in his head during a walk. And then began the most heart-rending labor I ever saw. It was a series of efforts, irresolutions, to seize again certain details of the theme he had heard.
When Chopin was told that Warsaw had fallen to Russia, he wanted to return to Poland and fight. His family and friends urged him to remain in Paris, and he translated his fervent patriotic feelings into his revolutionary study.
Don't talk to me of composing. Creation can't be learned. Every man sleeps, eats, moves differently, and yet they're expected to create all in the same way. I torment myself devilishly over every piece.
the day of Chopin's funeral, Théophile Gautier writes,
The soul of Mozart, dead at barely 36 years of age, seemed to hover and weep on the young soul of Chopin, his soul sister, telling us the poem of his long suffering.
Unlike Schubert and Schumann, who never leave their native Austria and Germany, and lived out their lives among a small circle of friends, Chopin and Liszt travel almost ceaselessly across Europe. During these wanderings, they frequent the most brilliant and most aristocratic society of their day. French became Liszt's main language, and as a young man, his friends were Victor Hugo, Chopin, and Berlioz. Liszt was a French romantic. At Nohant, in the manor house of his close friend, the writer Georges Sand, many evenings are spent in the company of the great French romantics. Evenings spent with the painter Delacroix, with the poet de Musset, and evenings spent reading and discussing the works of Byron, Hoffmann, and Hugo. At Nohant, Liszt amuses himself by making a paraphrase of Schubert's song, The Earl King. Georges Sand recalls the time Liszt spent in her house.
In the evening, while Franz was playing Schubert's most fantastic melodies, the princess was strolling in the shadow around the terrace, dressed in a very pale green dress. The moon was going down behind the big lime trees. A profound calm reigned among the plants. The breeze had fallen, dying, exhausted on the long grass at the first sublime notes. The nightingale was still pouring forth its complex song, but with a timid, swooning voice. No other art can so sublimely arouse the human feeling in the innermost heart of man. No other art can paint to the eyes of the soul the splendors of nation, the delights of contemplation, the tumult of passion, the languor of sufferings. Regret, hope, fear, reflection, anxiety, excitement, faith, doubt, glory, tranquility. These are the gifts from the genius of music which we receive, according to the potential of our own. The linden trees undertake to complete the melody with their soft, mysterious whispering, sharing the mysteries of nature. It's perhaps work he's trying out in fragments on the piano. These quick, impetuous melodies remind me of a ship battered by the tempest. Powerful artist, sublime in great things, always superior in small things, yet sad and devoured by a secret sadness.
Liszt was recognized as the greatest of all living pianists, a grand seigneur by the grace of God and by his own devotion to the noble craft of his art. After 2 long love affairs and numerous children, one of his daughters, Cosima, married the ultimate romantic musician Richard Wagner, Liszt turns increasingly to God and the spiritual comfort of the church. During the last few years of his life, he withdraws from the concert stage and from the more earthly love of his faithful companion, Princess Wittgenstein. His last years are spent as the Abbé Liszt, a man in holy orders. In these words, Liszt expresses the restless melancholy of the romantic artist.
Encore un jour et je pars. Libre enfin de 1000 liens plus chimériques.
Another day, and I am leaving. Free at last of the 1,000 ties, more imagined than real, with which man so foolishly allows his will to be fettered. I am leaving for unknown countries. Countries in which my desires and hopes have been living for a long time. Happy the traveler. Happy is he who never retraces his path, but who knows how to break with things before they break him. The artist should set up tent for an hour and move on. Is his country not somewhere else? It seems to him that he has known a clearer sky, a hotter sun, and better beings. How can he evade these vain sadnesses, these indeterminate regrets? He must sing and move on. The artist has a melancholy, but a lofty destiny. He is born, branded with the seal of predestination. Whatever happens to him, his will remains fixed towards his pole. And the pole, for him, is art. It is the inspired and sensitive giving forth of that which is mysteriously divine in man and in creation.